Okay, we're here with the Inside Lead, and we have a special guest for everyone today. We have Frank Reeb, our Director of HR in Kansas Athletics. Frank, how's it going?
It's going great this Friday morning.
Good, very good. So let's just start off the bat. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background and why you decided to go into human resources?
Sure. Somewhat of a unique background, I would imagine. I have a bachelor's degree and a law degree from the University of Kansas. Took me a while to find HR as a career, but with my law degree, I practiced law for about 7 years, and during that time, I focused quite a bit on employment law, and had an opportunity to work with quite a few human resources professionals. I saw what they did. I saw how they enjoyed it as a career, and felt like that was something that I would be good at. And being in HR allows me to continue with the law, which I really enjoy. Quite a few components of human resources have some legal foundation, whether they be statutes, things like that. And about 20 years ago, actually, I had an opportunity to transition away from sort of the true legal profession and get into human resources, and haven't looked back and certainly haven't regretted it, and very happy that I made that transition.
Excellent. So what was your undergraduate degree in?
Actually, my undergraduate degree is in meteorology, of all things.
What?
Yeah, at one time I wanted to be a pilot. Still I have a private pilot's license, but I wanted to be a pilot, and actually I spent in between my bachelor's degree and law degree, I actually was in the U.S. Air Force for a while. My opportunity to be a pilot in the military wasn't to be. Medically speaking, it wasn't something that I was able to physically do, but I'm certainly okay with that. And but still have an interest in aviation, kind of from a hobby perspective. But certainly a weather degree was something that would be very good as a pilot and within the aviation career. But it actually kind of gave me a good foundation. Now looking back on it, the thinking about things from a science perspective, that sort of analytical thing, I'd like to think gives me a good insight when I look at HR issues and analyze things. That legal foundation as well, that critical eye, that scientific eye, if you will. Both of those things from a combination, I think give me somewhat of an advantage as I look at things and analyze things within HR. Somewhat unique, but very proud of both of those degrees I have from KU.
Love it. Love it. That is so interesting. Okay, so tell us what your day-to-day looks like.
Well, like probably quite a few positions here at Kansas Athletics, there may not be a typical day, but there are some things that probably happen from day to day. And one of them is I really look at HR as a customer service component of this organization, and probably any organization has HR as a customer service component. So I make a big part of my day to have an open door for employees and supervisors. We get quite a few within HR and payroll. We get quite a few walk-in meetings with employees and with supervisors. So that's a big part of my day. We want to make sure employees are comfortable asking questions. They don't have to schedule an appointment. Same way with supervisors. We want to make sure they can have their questions answered. So that's a big part of my day. That's a big part of Diane's day here in HR, and Chrissy as our payroll coordinator. But so that's a big component of it. The other thing is typically we have some projects we're working on. So usually I try to carve out an hour or two in the morning and another hour or two in the afternoon. I won't necessarily close my door, but I do try to focus a little bit on some project work that needs to get done either for that day or during that week. But quite often I'll go into my morning with an idea of what I want to do in my day. And by the end of the day, I may not have touched that. But at the same time, during that day, I've accomplished quite a bit in terms of making sure employees and supervisors have their needs met. And again, that's the customer service piece about HR.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so a job is posted on the website. I'm assuming that you have access to everything that's posted and every applicant. Tell us about that and what that process is like, but then also how much weight does the resume, because everybody has to have their resume, how much weight does that carry, for you when you're looking at applicants?
As to the first part of that question, yes, one of my roles as the director of HR is to make sure that our positions are posted. We have an online applicant tracking system, like a lot of employers in this day and age. But I sort of have the final button, if you will, in making sure our positions are posted on our job board. It's on kuathletics.com. We make sure that a job description is prepared. That's one of the first steps in posting a job, to make sure a job description for that job is accurate. We work with a supervisor, the direct supervisor for that position. They essentially act as a hiring manager for the job when we post it on our job board. But oftentimes the position requires some minimum qualifications. Just about every job we post has some minimum qualifications. We will build questions on the online application around that job description and those required qualifications. So that's one part of posting a job online. But also there's an opportunity to upload a resume. To me, a well-written, accurate, current resume is very critical in the process. It may in some way duplicate some of the questions that are being asked on the online application or through that online tracking system. But at the same time, having the ability to upload a PDF version of a well-written resume, in my view, may be a separator between two individual applicants that may have identical answers to the online questions. But looking at a resume and comparing one resume to another, you can pick out quite a bit about that individual through the online resume. So to me, a resume, even in this day and age with some online applicant tracking systems, a resume is very, very important. I spend quite a bit of time reviewing resumes through my day and week.
So you said a buzzword with resumes, because a lot of people don't know this, but when you upload your resume onto any type of tracking system or anything like that, you've got to do it in a PDF. Have you had situations where maybe you can't read the resume and that's impacted if you want to bring that person in for a resume because they didn't load it as a PDF?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Typically, our applicant tracking system will accept a couple of different formats, but it may not be formatted correctly, if that makes sense. In other words, our applicant tracking system would accept a Word document that's not in a PDF, but when it's uploaded, it sort of loses some of that formatting. And that's just unique to this system. It's probably comparable to other applicant tracking systems. But taking the time to convert it into a PDF, a document, and sort of freezing it the way it currently looks really can set you apart from someone else who just uploaded a Word document or perhaps didn't upload a resume at all. So very, very true that uploading a PDF version of a resume is a big step, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but it is an important step.
Okay, excellent. So you said a little bit about what you look for in a resume in terms of it being accurate and current and well written. Is there anything else that kind of catches your eye?
Yes, I think first of all, when I look at a resume, as I mentioned, there are usually, almost always, some minimum requirements for that particular job. So one of the first things I do is to look to see if those minimum requirements are met. There may be some experience requirements, there may be some specific education requirements, there may be some specific skill requirements, and so I'll look to see that those are listed on someone's resume. Kind of from a broader perspective, if you will, I like to look and see, is it readable? Do they make the best use of the space on a printed page? Is it laid out correctly? Do they use some variation of font size? Do they, kind of separate it out with boldface type, underlining, italicized font, things like that, but use it efficiently and economically? Do they use words efficiently? In other words, can they make statements and use action verbs and things like that? And as to action verbs, I think you can find out a lot about someone as a person. How do they refer to themselves in a resume? You can maybe get some insight, and in somewhat an initial insight. It may not always be accurate, but I think it's pretty good. Generally speaking, you can find out someone's confidence, someone's self-confidence, how they refer to themselves. Are they overconfident? I mean, if they're in a position that's kind of as an internship and things, and they talk about saving a company multi-million dollars, I would kind of question that. But at the same time, they ought to be able to provide some accurate description of what they did in that internship, and they can do so in a confident manner. So with a little bit of review, I think you can find out quite a bit about someone by spending some time looking at a resume. But those are some of the things that I look for, generally speaking, in a resume.
Very interesting. Okay, so on the flip side of that, is there anything that you just can't stand if it's on the resume?
Yes, and some of these things may be obvious, but misspellings, typos, kind of some inconsistent use of font size or type, too wordy, maybe too many bullets, those type of things. Again, back to that readability piece I spoke of a second ago. And then a couple other things. There may be some mixed thought on this, but this is my opinion. I'm not a big fan of career objectives. Again, back to the point of making efficient use of the printed page. I'd like to think that someone's that's just entering the workforce full time. You ought to be able to put on one page your resume and everything about it, and that what that means is the career objective. You may be able to use that space a little more effectively, and keeping in mind that your resume, it really markets you and what you can do for the employer. In my view, the career objective really says more about you as what you want and what your needs are, and maybe not necessarily what you can do for the employer. Not to say career objectives aren't important. That's not what I'm saying at all. But for purposes of a resume, I'm someone who thinks you can make better use of that one page through some other education accomplishments, things like that. So I'm not a fan of career objectives. There's time to get into career objectives if you are given the opportunity for an interview. Certainly there's usually some variation of the classic question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or why did you get your degree in whatever it was you pursued your education in, those type of things. So, but for purposes of a resume, career objective is something I'm not too big of a fan on. And along those same lines, making the statement at the bottom of your resume, references available upon request. That's something I'm also not a big fan of. Again, for making the best use of that one page, references are certainly very important, and they're very, very important. What I would prefer to see is a second page that would have just references on it, and making good use of those references. But that statement, references available upon request, again, I think you can make better use of that one page resume without it. So those are some things that I'm not a fan of when I
Okay. So do you have any tips for our student athletes who are working on their resume right now? Like we're making sure that they're getting in and they're getting their resume done, or at least they're starting on it, because it's one of those things, it's a process. It's not going to be perfect and completed the first time you sit down and do it. So do you have any tips for those who are assembling their resume and taking your, kind of what you just said, and putting it in. Do you have any other tips for when they're applying for their first job or applying to graduate school?
I do. And I guess the first tip I would give anyone is spend some time on that resume. View it as a dynamic document. As you said, it's a process. And have a first draft that you create, and then have someone that you trust that will give you a critical eye. Look for those typos, look for those misspellings, give you some critical feedback about that resume. Take that feedback and draft version 2. And then continue to have people you work with and trust to give you some critical feedback that those typos and misspellings and all those things I spoke of that I don't like to see and others likely don't like to see, make sure those are all corrected. That's a start. Make best use of things like action verbs like I talked about earlier. I think those are very, very important, and don't overuse certain font size or italics or boldface type or things like that. And there are also a lot of times I think young folks just entering the workforce may feel like they won't have a whole lot of work experience, but if you think about it a little bit, whether it be through community service, perhaps some volunteer work or something like that, there ought to be some skills that you can highlight and elaborate on to fill up that one-page document. So if you and reach out to your resources, the people you trust, and have review your resume draft to make sure that you're not overlooking anything. But those are some things I think that young people just entering the workforce and looking for that first full-time position in an organization can do to have a accurate, up-to-date, thorough resume that really markets themselves and what they can do for an employer.
Excellent. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. I've learned a lot about you, and that I didn't know that your undergraduate degree was in meteorology, and you have a private pilot license. That's pretty neat. But beyond that, you talked a little bit about what HR is. I know sometimes there's question of, okay, well, what does human resources do? And you are an excellent example of an awesome HR director. You have customer service, and you look at problems with a scientific eye, which is always nice and comforting as an employee. For resumes, you give some awesome feedback about resumes with, make sure you're uploading it as a PDF. Make sure it's well written, make sure it's concise, and you're meeting the job description. So you're tailoring your resume to the job description, and you meet those specific or minimum requirements that they have. Go through it and make sure that there's, you've got good use of your space. There's no misspellings. You're not a fan of the career objectives of what that applicant wants to get out of it, but more so what that person can do for the company, which I think is really key that a lot of people overlook. It's good to have goals, but remember you're trying to make sure that you're marketing what you can bring to that company. And again, just making sure that you've got good use of that space. And that's important because you get that one page and that's it. So you got to make sure that you're putting time into it to make it a good document. But Frank, we thank you so much for your time. We're so happy that you could do this. You've got great insight to the human resources world and applying for jobs and resumes. And we really, really appreciate it.
I'm very happy to help out, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to do it again soon.
Excellent. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.